The pandemic created a seismic shift in not only where and how Americans work, but also in where and how they would prefer to work. Workplace flexibility is top of mind as employees are looking for opportunities to do their job in a way that best suits their lifestyle and responsibilities. A survey from Yo revealed that of people who currently work remotely 100% of the time, nearly 2 times as many say they prefer to remain fully remote versus those preferring to go to a hybrid environment, and more than 10 times as many as those who want to work fully in person. But today, flexibility extends well beyond where someone does their work. I'm Joe McIntyre, host of Back to Work, and on this episode, we discuss flexibility in the workplace. Caroline Castrillon joins us on this episode to discuss how employers can use scheduling to recruit and retain top talent. As a former marketing executive, Caroline is the founder of Corporate Escape Artists, a career coaching firm dedicated to helping corporate professionals go from soul-sucking jobs to career fulfillment. Caroline is a certified professional coach and a regular Forbes contributor. She has also been featured in publications including the New York Times, Entrepreneur, Inc., and Success Magazine. Caroline, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you were a marketing executive for a long time. What made you switch to become this career coach that you've become now?
Yeah, so I was in the corporate world for 25 years, feeling unfulfilled and trapped in my cubicle, wanting to actually be my own boss, but not knowing what to do or how to get there. And then I actually hired my own career coach, and that's when I sort of had my breakthrough. So now I like to help other people in that same situation. If they're looking for career clarity, they feel stuck, they want to start a business, or they just want to maybe change careers. That's something I feel really passionate about, is just helping people find that fulfillment and just knowing that it is possible no matter what age you are.
Yeah, do you find that a certain age group, whether it's, you're more senior in your career, they can sometimes feel like it's impossible to switch the way you really want to?
Yeah, and what I tell people is that's the first step. The
Mm-hmm.
first step is believing that it's possible. And if you can get over that hump, you can accomplish anything. Because then the next thing is just determining what you want to do and then developing a plan to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't believe it's possible, it's really hard to achieve any goal.
Yeah, not just changing careers, but any goal kind of impossible when you don't believe it actually is. Yeah.
That's why I like to share my story, because I changed careers at 47, which isn't, that young. So, and it was a pretty big change, but I was able to use a lot of skills that were transferable. And that's what I encourage people to leverage when they're thinking about making big changes.
What does flexibility in the workplace even mean? Does it have the same meaning for everyone?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say, the first thing people think of is working remotely or, working from home or from anywhere, but it could also mean, now we're seeing a lot of hybrid opportunities. But it's also like we're talking about maybe the 4-day work weeks, unlimited PTO, caregiving leave, paternity, maternity leave, shared employment, sabbaticals, part-time options, flexible work shifts. So it can be a combination of all of those different things as well. It just depends on what it means to the individual.
And how important is it for employers to provide a flexible workplace to employees? We hear about it all the time. It's constantly being discussed in the media, constantly being discussed in HR trades and publications. But what are some of the benefits of it? Why does this all kind of need to happen?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely important because employees are asking for it. We got used to working remotely during the pandemic, and while there was an adjustment period, people like it. And what I'm seeing is they're actually preferring the hybrid work environment where you get kind of the best of both worlds. But it's a benefit for both the employee and the employer, because for the employee, typically, there's studies that show it reduces burnout. It promotes health and wellness because you have a more flexible schedule, improves morale. You can prioritize your family life, and obviously it reduces commuting time and gas expenses and things like that. For the organization, we're seeing it actually boosts productivity. It can save the organization money in terms of like saving on office space and utilities, and it improves recruitment and retention, increases engagement, reduces tardiness, and absenteeism. So it's really a win-win for both parties.
Now, are there any drawbacks to increase flexibility in our careers? It sounds silly to even ask that, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a good question also because with remote work, there's always upsides and downsides, pros and cons. So there's the difficulty in disconnecting sometimes. So when we work, especially 100% remote, sometimes people feel like they have to be always on. So that can be something that people need to manage. You obviously need to be organized with your time and self-motivated. It can sometimes feel isolating if you work from home 100% and you don't have that interaction with other individuals. So you need to be more proactive about communication and keeping your manager updated and communicating with colleagues and things like that, especially if they're, crossing time zones working in different countries.
In your opinion, would giving employees the opportunity to pick the hours they work, so let's say, 8 to 4 versus 9 to 5 versus 10 to 6, whatever it may be, would giving them that chance to pick their hours provide a healthier environment? Is that a real solution, or does it kind of depend on what industry they're working in?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the industry. I mean, that's one scenario, allowing people to determine, when they work, also how they work and where they work there's opportunities there too. So there's no one size fits all solution. It's really dependent on the company, the industry. We're seeing some companies, and it's really mostly coming from the top down. Companies like, Tesla, and Disney. Bob Iger just announced that he wants them to come in to the office at least 4 days a week. So at least they still have the hybrid option. But again, it's really dependent on the company culture and the industry.
Now, I think you hinted at this before and talked about a couple options, but what are some other types of flexibility beyond just hybrid remote hours you work? How can this work in a way that kind of suits individual people? I'm sure everybody kind of has different expectations, different needs, and different requirements for their home and work balance. But what are some of the options that companies can offer?
Yeah. So there's a lot of momentum, I guess I would say, around the shorter work week, the 4-day work week. And they're testing that in different companies and in different countries, and they're seeing a lot of success with that. So that's one viable option. Obviously, hybrid is what I'm seeing as being the most popular at this point because it's that sort of best of both worlds for both the employer and employee. And then obviously, the 100% remote option. And then I mentioned some of the other ones like maternity and paternity leave, opportunity for caregivers to have leave. That's something that came up as being very important during the pandemic. Term time work, so the ability to work during, let's say, the school year and then take paid or unpaid leave while the kids are out of school. That might be another option, or even shared work or shared employment opportunities. So having 2 or 3 people share the responsibilities of one full-time job. That's another option.
Caroline, obviously this whole idea of working extra hours, working constantly, and especially the lower maternity and paternity leave seems to be, to many, a uniquely American problem. Is that actually the case, or are we being Americans more similar to our European counterparts than we even realize?
Yeah. Well, specifically around, maternity, paternity leave, America is actually behind a lot of countries in offering what many people believe, we should be offering men and women when they bring a human being into the world. But besides that, from a remote and hybrid standpoint, I'm seeing a lot of similarities around the world, especially among knowledge workers and in large corporations. There's a little bit more of I would say, momentum around the 4-day work week in Europe, for example, where they've been testing it out and seeing success. And now I'm seeing it trickle down here. So hopefully that there'll be more companies here willing to test that out.
Now, let's say someone wants more flexibility in their job. They're not necessarily happy with the way it's going. How do they go about asking for that? How do they make their job suck less, as as you said?
Yeah. So There's basically three options, right? Like if your employer is saying you need to get back to the office, you either comply, you leave, or you negotiate. So I always encourage people to negotiate because you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. It's good experience, even if you don't, get what you want, or you might get some of what you want. So the first thing I would say is do your research before you speak to your manager or anybody like that. Get clear on your company's work from home policies. What are other people experiencing? Has anybody else been able to negotiate, like a permanent work from home situation or partially working from home? And that way you have all the data that you need before you go in there. When you do meet with your employer, focus on how it benefits them, the additional productivity, reducing operating costs, all those sort of things. I would encourage people to actually prepare a proposal, make it somewhat formalized so that you're prepared, they take you seriously, it's documented. Practice your requests like you would any other meeting or presentation. I would definitely encourage people to meet in person for this one, so it's a face-to-face. And naturally with any negotiation, you want to exude positive energy. Cite examples, like if, let's say during the pandemic, you were able to accomplish X, Y, and Z, or maybe even surpass your goals from the previous years when you were coming into the office. That's great data to come in with. And think about options. So don't just ask for one thing. Think about, okay, if I ask for this and they say no, maybe we can negotiate something different. So think about like 2 or 3 options. And if they say no initially, there's always the possibility of another follow-up conversation. So I would just be prepared for a no. But if you do get a no, just ask your boss, what are your concerns, and see if there's any way you can address those.
How can employers provide more of an easy transition from fully remote to hybrid? Hopefully not fully in person for those people who are still looking for that. But kind of what are some of those tips for employers maybe who want to bring people back from fully remote to at least some sort of hybrid environment?
Yeah. Well, definitely, be as transparent as possible. You might need to, like if it's a hybrid situation, the employer might even need to revise the office layout because you won't be using the office in the same way as you were before. People obviously are concerned with safety and health, so you want to make sure it's a safe, clean, environment. Give employees plenty of notice so they can adjust their schedules, especially people with children. There's a lot of, or caregivers, they need to make arrangements. You might even consider subsidizing some or all of the commute costs for your employees who have to incur, longer commutes and obviously expensive gas prices. And from a technology standpoint, don't forget about making sure everything works properly. When we get back in there, like the Wi-Fi, the VPN, you don't want to be wasting time having the IT guy running around and losing productivity if the technology is not working. So those are some of the things, and then making sure people have access to the tools that they need to be successful.
Now, I'm going to ask you to put on your bring out your crystal ball for a second. Do you think that hybrid workplace environments are going to be the future long term? This is kind of what we're seeing, or do you think it's going to kind of go in waves where some organizations maybe stick fully in person, some stick fully remote, or kind of what do you foresee specific when it comes to where people work? How does that shake out in the next 5-10 years?
Well, for right now, I'm seeing most organizations are embracing this hybrid option in some form or fashion. And then there's always a few that are embracing like remote first, companies like Shopify and Deloitte. Then there's always going to be a few that, again, it's based on this top-down scenario like Netflix and Goldman Sachs, where they're going to want people in the office, in their seats. But I think that's going to generally be the minority because that's not what most people want.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the hybrid is what's winning out right now.
Are there any other changes or whether they are coming or they need to happen in terms of workplace flexibility that you see happening in the future. Certainly, lots changed over the past 3 years that nobody really predicted. So, is there anything that you have in your mind that kind of needs to happen for people to be really satisfied and happy in their jobs?
What people really want is flexibility, fulfillment, and freedom. So they just want all they want is their employer to trust them to do their jobs and to give them the opportunity to do it in a way that makes them feel valued and productive. And so, and that's different for every employee because we're all individuals. So listening to your employees is really important. Be empathetic, listen to what they have to say, and then, react to that appropriately.
So, Caroline, specific to employees, what if anything can they do to increase flexibility in the workplace?
Yeah. So when we're talking about flexible workplaces, we're giving people the opportunity to work where and when and how they would like to. And so it helps to be a team player in that scenario. Like if a colleague's out of the office, maybe you can jump in and pitch in for them, step in, pick up the slack. That way they can return the favor. And just being open-minded, transparent, encourage feedback from others. And just that whole idea of a transparent work environment also helps to increase flexibility in the workplace. A big one that's coming up now, especially with Shopify reducing all of their meetings, is limit your meetings. So, unless they're absolutely necessary because they detract from getting the real work done a lot of times. So if you can do that, that makes a big impact.
Sounds great to me as someone who has 4 back-to-back meetings today. Cutting some of those out would be a welcome addition to my day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about workplace flexibility and your background here. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, whether it is just to ask a question or have you become their career coach, where should they go?
My website, corporateescapeartist.com, or you can email me at caroline@corporateescapeartist.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And also to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. To hear future episodes of the podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen in. For Yo's Back to Work, I'm Joe McIntyre. Thanks for listening.